What's up, everybody? Tempest Wing here. It's another day in paradise, and I'm here today to talk to you about the NA imports and what I think of them. So, ever since Season 5, there's been a rule that you can only have 2 imports per team. And since then, we've seen a mass influx of Koreans and Europeans into the NA scene, and I'll be honest, at first I was skeptical about a lot of them. It seemed that, if they could have Koreans or if they could have imports, teams would just import any two, foreigners into their team and just, despite of how good they were or like what skills they had or what they brought to the team, if they could speak fluent English. And I gotta say, and this is largely in part to the fact that over the years, more and more talented players have come to NA to sort of make the region more skilled in general. But I'm looking at all of the imports. There's 18 imports in the NA LCS coming up. Basically, every team has their maximum amount of 2 imports, except for Golden Guardians, which has 0. And I'm looking at it, and I think for the first time, I can actually say I'm pretty impressed with the caliber of the import players that are in the NA region. So I'm just going to run through them real quick. Some of these players I've already kind of touched on in previous videos, so hopefully this isn't too much of a rehash, but I'm going to be talking most of these up because I think they're, for the most part, they're pretty good. There'll be a few that I'll be iffy on, but let's just go ahead and get started. So 100 Thieves, they got Someday in the top lane and Ryu in the mid lane, both Korean players. Someday used to be on a Korean team called KT Rolster, and he was basically the star player for at least 2 years, just like a carry top player. Even on tanks, he was pretty good. He came to NA in Season 7, and he played for Dig for a year, and he was basically the star player of that team too. He could play shit like Jarvan and basically carried it from the top lane. He was basically their win condition, like he was the best player on their team, and some would argue the best top laner in America, so definitely a great pickup in the NA region. So definitely a good pickup by 100 Thieves. In the mid lane, they have Ryu as well, also on one of those KT Rolster teams. I'm not sure if it was the same one as Someday or not, but he played mid. He used to be known as one of the best mids in the world, like way back when. Obviously famous for the Faker versus Ryu clip where it's Zed versus Zed, and he gets shit on, but that's another story. And then recently he hasn't looked as good, but he was on H2K, a European team, for 2 years, went to Worlds both years with that team. And for the last year has been on P1. He has had some motivation issues recently, but if Ryu is back on track and willing to put in the effort this season, I could see him being a pretty solid mid laner. So overall, 100 Thieves, I think he did a pretty solid job with your imports. All right, moving on to Cloud9. They have obviously Jensen in the mid lane, and recently they have just picked up Svensgaren from TSM. For those of you who don't know Svensgaren, in past history before TSM, he was on a European team. He's European, obviously. Both Jensen and Svensgaren are Danish. They're European players. Svensgaren started out on ASK Gaming in the LCS era. Actually, I think he was on another team before that, but I basically started seeing him on SK Gaming Season 4, Season 5, and he was basically like a very aggressive, sort of like almost like counter jungle style, and he was known as one of the best junglers in Europe at the time. And I feel like he got a pretty bad rap on TSM because I feel like when he came to TSM, like for a while, he was still really good, playing shit like Lee Sin and bodying people. But recently, it seems like he was in sort of a slump. But I think that he's still a pretty good player. I don't know if he's like the best jungler in North America, but he's definitely decent, and he's a pretty good pickup considering they're losing contracts. And TSM let go Svensgaren, so I think he'll work well with Jensen, and maybe those two can be a bit of a dynamic duo in the mid lane. So that'll obviously bring me to Jensen. This guy used to be known as like a solo queue god. His name originally was Incarnation, and he was like just like I think he was like rank 1 in Europe. but he was like permabanned for toxicity or some shit. So he was never in LCS until Season 5 when Cloud9 brought him to NA. And since then, he's pretty much been either number 1 or number 2 mid laners in NA. I mean, when he first joined Cloud9, they looked really bad because they had to get used to either not playing with high or playing with high in the jungle. But pretty much after that sort of shaky beginning period, I'd say he's definitely a strong laner and a strong carry. He may not be as well-rounded as Bjergsen, but definitely a very, very good mid laner, and looking for, big things from him coming up in this season. So Cloud9 also did pretty good job with their import slots, Svenskeren and Jensen. Wow, all right, here's another banger. So now we're going to move to Clutch Gaming. They picked up Lyra in the jungle and Febiven in the mid lane. So Lyra started out, I never watched LCK too heavily, and I never really watched this team, but Lyra got his claim to fame on a Korean team called Anarchy, also later known as a Freak of Freaks. I believe that's what it's called now. But he came to America, or he came to NA in Season 7, like a lot of these, Korean, top-level Koreans, and he basically joined Team Envy, and that was a terrible team at first, but he was basically the star of that team, considered, it might be a stretch, but some considered him the best jungler in North America at the time. He's still obviously very good, maybe has a little more competition now, but this roster that he's on now is basically like a supercharged version of Envy, and Envy was, by the end of Season 7, Envy was, not a terrible team. They made playoffs, went out in the first round, but hey, top 6, not bad, considering they were like last the previous split. So I think Lyra should be comfortable enough. I'm not sure how good his communication is or his English, but he should be good enough where he can definitely make an impact on this team in 2017. And then we got Febiven. So Febiven, he came in as a rookie. He's a European player, first of all. He came in as a rookie Season 5 on the Fnatic roster, which was the one with Huni, Reignover, Yellowstar, and then later Reckless. And that was the split where that summer was the split where they went 18-0 and got to the semifinal of Worlds. Looked like one of the best European teams ever. And Febiven on Fnatic, that year Fnatic wasn't even the main carry. I'd say Huni was probably the main carry, and he basically played around him because Reignover was always up there too. But he definitely sort of developed in his own right. Definitely a solid player. Season 6, Fnatic took kind of a dip, but Febiven still looked pretty good. And then he was on H2K in 2017. Definitely looks like a strong player. H2K, despite the fact that they never did anything in playoffs, always looked like a solid team with Febiven sort of at the forefront. So that's a great pickup for Clutch. So Clutch Gaming has Lyra and Febiven. I think that's a solid import duo right there. I think that's really smart for them to basically upgrade the core of Envy and make a team around Febiven. All right, let's keep on rolling. CLG. Okay, CLG is really interesting, I think. So they have Reignover and Huhi, who are both Koreans, but they're basically both fluent in English, which I think is really important. Because some of these other guys, like Someday, Ryu, Lyra, I mean, they've been over here for like a year. I don't know how good their English is. I don't know how well they can communicate with the rest of the team. I guess Ryu was in Europe for a while, so he's speaking English over there. But Reignover and Huhi are both English speakers. So I think that's really important because CLG is definitely a team that requires a lot of communication and a lot of teamwork. They're gonna, since Aframu left, they're gonna need a new team captain. Maybe that'll be Reignover. He's definitely had some leadership experience on the past in Immortals. All right, so I won't get ahead of myself. Basically, Reignover, he started out on Fnatic, just like Febiven, and he was sort of the dynamic duo with Huni, not Huhi, but Huni, the top laner, and they were together for another year on Immortals. But basically, Reignover came to be touted as, on Fnatic, he was probably the worst player on Fnatic. Not that he was bad, but he wasn't, anything too special. It was sort of like the Huni show. But on Immortals, it seemed like he, improved and maybe there's less competition, but he was considered at one point to be the best jungler in North America, maybe like Season 6. And then he had a year on Team Liquid that looked kind of iffy. I didn't really watch too much of Team Liquid, but that was just kind of a bad team in general. So he's coming off of a bad year, and he's probably got some things to prove. I don't think he's by any means a bad player, but we'll just have to see how he meshes with the team. And then Huhi, I always forget that he's an import because he kind of came in once they basically kicked, CLG got rid of Pobelter, or they're going to use Pobelter and Huhi, and then Pobelter left, so they ended up using Huhi. And it seemed like a downgrade at first because Huhi was like not fantastic when he first joined CLG, and people were just like ragging on him hardcore. But I'd say over the course of the 2 years, he definitely improved. He's sort of he was almost like a sacrificial lamb at first. It didn't matter what would happen to Huhi. He would play for the team, and their main carry at the beginning was Stixay, the AD carry. So he would just kind of play more team fight stuff and hope for the best. But I think Huhi at this point is definitely a strong carry. Probably one of the better. I mean, the mid lane pool in North America looks pretty stacked right now, but he's probably at least top half. So I think CLG did good. Obviously, they've had Huhi for a while, and now they've just picked up Rainover. As far as imports go, I think that's a pretty solid thing. All right, now I'm going to go to my first, I guess, iffy team, which is Echo Fox, who got Huni. I'm not cutting you guys any slack here. I'm going straight from Huhi to Huni. So Huni in the top lane and Phoenix in the mid lane for Echo Fox. So another ex-Fnatic player is Huni. He was probably one of the the main character. I've sort of already talked about this, but he was on Fnatic Season 5, Immortal Season 6. Definitely a main carry on both of those teams. Kind of crazy champion pool, willing to bust out some stupid shit if he can pull it off. Lucian top, ha ha ha. And he was definitely always strong, but kind of had that wild side where you never knew if he was gonna like tilt out of control or if he was just gonna pick something stupid and fail on it. So kind of a double-edged sword in that regard. And then he moves to, and then in Season 7. He goes to SK Telecom, of all teams, and for a while it looks like he kind of reins it in, playing tanks and shit. But that team had its issues for whatever reason. But they made it to the finals of Worlds, which I guess is pretty good. He played a lot of carry champions at Worlds, but he didn't always look fantastic. They sort of subbed him out with Untara, so him coming into Echo Fox, I don't know what to think. If this had been the year before he went to SKT, I might be a little more up on him, but maybe just putting him in Korea kind of exposed some of his weaknesses. I'm not really sure, but he's definitely an iffy player, and we'll just have to watch because he could be really good, but he could be a feeder. We don't know. And then Phoenix is like pretty all right. He's been in Challenger for a while, but I think for 2 years he was on Team Liquid, kind of the older. Well, I don't even know what the older Team Liquid is considered to be, but he was on Team Liquid for a while. He was definitely very good at certain champions like Azir or like Corki or whatever, but he definitely got overhyped. And I know Team Liquid was always a good team, but I'm not sure if Phoenix was really the reason. I think he's always been like pretty okay. So I guess Huni and Phoenix, I'm kind of down on this team in general because they have like Dardoch and their bot lane is pretty whatever. So I guess Echo Fox did okay, but this one, after coming off of like Huhi and Rainover, and then Lyra and Febiven, and Svensgaren and Jensen, those are definitely like dynamic duos. These two, I'm just like, I guess that's, if you had to get imports, that's pretty good. So we'll move on. I don't have too much more to say about that, so let's keep on moving. FlyQuest. Okay, so I think FlyQuest did okay. They got Flame in the top lane. Definitely a great pickup. Flame's claim to fame, say that 5 times fast. Flame's claim to fame was basically being one of the OG like hardcore carry top laners back in Korea on CJ Entus Blaze primarily. And he sort of like went to China, came back to Korea, didn't really do much for a couple years, and then season 7 came to Immortals, and he was definitely, one of the strong top laners in North America, right up there with like Someday and Hanser and whoever else you might want to put in that conversation. But Immortals struggled at first, but I would say Flame. I would say Flame might be like the second best top laner in my opinion after Someday. He definitely looked good. He could play tanks. He could play a few carries. He could kind of do it all. Definitely a great player. So for him to go to FlyQuest to nab him, who do they have before? I think they have like Balls. That's definitely an upgrade. So that was a great pickup. I think Flame will do well in Season 8. And then their mid laner, I don't know too much what to think of. His name is Fly, so when he plays on FlyQuest, it's going to say Fly on his name tag, which is pretty troll. But I don't know too much about him, so I don't want to say very much. I know he was in NA Challenger. Before that, he was the mid laner for KT Rolster the year that they probably were pretty close to going to Worlds, but I think they got beat by Samsung in the Gauntlet or something, and it was pretty close. So I don't know if I feel like he was kind of whatever on that team. That team already had Score and Someday and other pretty good players. So I'm not really sure what to think about him. Always kind of a question mark when you throw like a somewhat random Korean in. And the other player, like the native players on this team, look pretty iffy to me. So I'm not really sure what to think. But FlyQuest, you did a good job getting Flame, and we'll have to see with Fly. All right, let's go to Optic. I think Optic did a great job getting imports. It's just I don't think any of their other players are really up to snuff. So it's really going to be up to these imports to carry this team. So they got Power of Evil in the mid lane, which that's an excellent pickup, and they got Arrow in the AD carry, which is pretty good too. So Power of Evil started out in Season 5, Unicorns of Love. That was like a really wacky team. That was with Vizichachi and Kikis and some of those guys. And they would always play wacky picks. I mean, Power of Evil even now will do like weird builds, but like I remember in Season 5 he'd play like, he played a lot of like Kog'Maw mid, which I guess was like kind of meta, but he pioneered like Varus mid, and he would do like back when you could run, people would run like jungle items on their mid lane. I remember one time he did like Devour Kale in the mid lane. It was some weird shit, and that one didn't work out very well. But he always had like a reason behind what he did, I guess. But he seemed like he was definitely the best player on that team. But then in Season 6, he went to Origin, which at the time was almost like a super team with all these veterans, and Sven at the time. Sven and Mithy were the bot lane, and he was in Origin, and they kind of busted out. I mean, Zen and Mithy left, but Power Reveal never looked as good on Origin as he did on Unicorns of Love. So kind of an iffy year for him, and you could definitely fault that on the team, maybe, but also him. I'm not sure if he was just really comfortable with playing with the UOL guys. But then we moved to Misfits, where he definitely had an upswing. They definitely had some other good players around him, but Power of Evil probably once again considered one of the top EU mid laners. So bringing him to NA, I think that's a good call. I don't know how this team is going to work around him, but I think individually he's pretty solid. So if you're an NA, if you're a new org like Optic and you get the chance to sign Power of Evil, I couldn't really blame you there. Might as well. And then Arrow is their AD carry. He came in last year on Phoenix 1 with Ryu. Before that, he was on KT Rolster with Someday and some of those other guys. Pretty good. I know at the beginning of Season 7, people were like on the Arrow hype train. I didn't think he was that good. I thought he was very good. I didn't think he was like extremely good. Sort of a late game team fight. And the problem with Arrow is I feel like he never really had a support that really, could really help him out too much. And right now, this split, he has Lemonation, and I don't know if that's the best matchup or not. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I've never seen Arrow with like a really good support. So that might be part of it. But I think yeah, I think getting Arrow is definitely a good thing. So Optic have Power Revival and Arrow. Job well done there. When we go to Team Liquid, I already made an entire video about Team Liquid, but basically to go through it again, they have Impact. Their imports are Impact in the top lane and Ole at support. Impact, solid tank player, started out in SKT, won Season 3 Worlds, stayed on SKT another year where they were kind of on the decline, moved to Impulse, where they were always a team, very close to going to Worlds, usually 1 or 2 series away from, making it. And then he was on NRG for a split and then went to Cloud9. I would say since he was on Cloud9, maybe even since Impulse, he's, been considered one of the top laners. Definitely more of a tank style, but very consistent player and very good for TL to get him. And then you go to Ole. He came over, I believe, from HKE, Hong Kong Esports, and then he joined Immortals in Season 7, where they struggled at first, and then he let's see. Oh yeah, he was sort of like so he was with Cody Sun at Immortals, so he was kind of the leader. He went for a lot of plays, probably made Cody Sun look pretty good, but so you got a playmaking aggressive support and a tank, solid consistent top laner. Kind of rushed through that one because if you want to know more about them, I made a video about Team Liquid's roster, and I kind of went into more detail, so I don't want to rehash it too much. But Impact and Ole, that's solid. And then TSM, wow, all right, TSM, that's probably the best you can do, is they just get the best Western bot lane from G2 of Sven and Mithy. I'm going to start with Mithy because since Origin, these two guys have laned together. So I'm going to start with Mithy, and then Sven will enter the scene partway through. So Mithy started in Season 3 on a team called Lemon Dogs, and this was a team that was basically like a bunch. I think this started out as just like a solo queue team, like a bunch of guys who were just really good, and they definitely had some talented players. Nuke Duck at the time was a beast. Their top laner, Zora Zero, was a beast. And their other players were not terrible either. And I can't remember if they won Europe or... No, they didn't win Europe, but they got to the finals. They went to Worlds. But Mithy, back then, Mithy is basically... He's like a support coach. He basically takes his AD carries and he makes them better. By playing with them. He kind of like teaches them, shows them the way. And this definitely was the case for Sven, because Mithy, turns out, was like banned for, I think it was like a year and a half for toxicity or whatever. So he doesn't get to play in the LCS until Season 5, spring. He makes a challenger team with Sven, Xpeke, Soaz, and Amazing. And they're just smurfing in challenger. They just blast all the way through there. And they get into the LCS as Origin. And Sven, I think he was a relative unknown, but I mean, these veterans picked him up as their one rookie for a reason. So, I guess they saw some potential in him, and he's sort of molded by Mithy. But I would say even by the end of Season 5, Sven was like the best or the second best AD carry in Europe. And then by Season 6, like it was pretty much confirmed. Like he was just a beast. After spring on Origin in 2016, he and Mithy jumped ship to G2. Obviously, G2, the best team in Europe for the past 2 years. Big part of that, Sven and Mithy. And now they've been together for over a year. So, I mean, people are already saying, they're the best Western bot lane, which I can't think of a better Western bot lane at that time. Yeah, I'm racking my brain. Yeah, they're definitely, I mean... What can I say? So they're on G2, and then they move over to TSM. So TSM, I mean, holy shit, you guys did it. You guys won. I mean, if you look at all these rosters, I was really up on, I guess the only people I'm somewhat iffy on are Ryu and Huni and Phoenix and Fly. Everyone else, I'm like, yeah, you did a pretty good job there. And that's, that's a good thing for NA, because the more competitive players we have, the better season it's going to be. So that went on for longer than I thought it would. Sorry for rambling and stuff, but yeah, that's the end of this video. Feel free to like the video, comment, dislike the video. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter. All right, Tempest out.
Hit me. Shit. Right in the sternum this time, T-baby. Shit, you already know. You already know. You already know. Damn. Shit. This that hustler music. Young Weezy got that motherfucking hustler music. So ride to it, y'all. Vibe to it, y'all. Damn. Goddamn. Next they hit a nigga in his head with this one. I'ma paint the city.